Was it no? Why don't I have a go live here? Oh, there we go.
We are live.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Noakes Foundation Live. Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty there with my Instagram. I was like, why aren't we live? Are we live? Where's live? Fantastic. So today, I am Maritza Honey, and we would like to welcome the lovely Tamzyn Murphy, that is our registered dietitian. She's also part of the chair. She's also part of the board of Eat Better South Africa. She's also a fantastic instructor at our nutrition network. Tamzyn, welcome to today's live.
Oh, thank you so much, Maritza. It's wonderful to be here.
Fantastic. So, just a few announcements before we get started. We would like you to remember that we have a Patreon page, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. This is us calling for support. Support the cause, support our research, support the people making a difference, like Tamzyn and her team, that is showing people how to live better, eat better, and do better with their lives. So, Tamzyn, I'm going to hand it over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've become such an awesome dietitian?
Thanks so much, Maritza. It's such an honor to be here and with your audience. Everything, obviously, I'm one of the three associated companies under, I suppose, the Noakes umbrella, if you will. So I'm very involved with the Noakes Foundation and the work that Noakes Foundation does. I, in fact, was a researcher with the Noakes Foundation. I did my master's degree looking at type 2 diabetes and low carbohydrate diets. And in that study, along with Chris Webster and Jamie Smith, we found 30. It was a pilot study, so we looked at 30 diabetics who had self-proclaimed to have reversed their diabetes. Now, diabetes is a progressive chronic disease. Chronic means that it is there forever. Progressive means that it gets worse over time, right? And that's what I was taught at dietetic school. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes, you get it, you always have it, and it only gets worse, until your deathbed. And here with 30 people who had contacted Prof. Noakes and that we recruited, who were claiming that they had reversed or put their diabetes into remission. In other words, they no longer had this chronic disease, and it certainly wasn't getting worse, because it was all better. So we thought, okay, well, let's investigate these claims. And this is before anything else in that line had come out. So we basically got their old medical records and checked whether they actually had been diagnosed with diabetes and what their blood glucose looked like in those old tests. And indeed, they had all been diagnosed with diabetes and their blood sugar was bad. And then we sent them for blood tests since they had been on a lower carbohydrate diet. They must have been on it for quite a long time. So they've been on it, I think, generally for about 6 months or longer. And 75% of them, I'm going to cut to the results, 75% of them had indeed put their diabetes into remission, as defined by having normal blood sugar in the face of coming off all medications, apart from one, which is metformin, because most people just stay on that one, irrespective. Yeah. It has some positive side effects, I suppose. But they basically, this is coming off insulin, coming off other hardcore diabetes drugs like sulfonylureas. So 75% of them had put their diabetes into remission by their own. No, this wasn't a doctor-driven intervention. This was people who gung-ho went on their own and had done this. And then the rest had still improved their diabetes dramatically. So this is really exciting results. It was a pilot study, and very soon after that, Virta Health study came out. A whole lot of systematic reviews and meta-analyses came out confirming that the other people in the literature were seeing this. Since then, a lot of literature has come out, and this isn't even in question anymore. We know that a low-carb diet can reverse type 2 diabetes. So that was research that I did being involved with the Noakes Foundation and through UCT and under the supervision of Prof. Noakes. And how did I even get there, you may ask? Well, I got there by by being a traditional dietitian, by believing that keto Atkins was Banting as a fad diet. And, I studied that. I thought anyone who recommends this kind of thing must be a quack. This is a fad diet. I started working at the supplement industry after actually having done a year of community service in the communities such as Lchf, and Eastern District in Cape Town. So I worked there for a year. I saw the terrible malnutrition, including obesity, which is a form of malnutrition. Mal doesn't say undernutrition. Undernutrition and overnutrition are both malnutrition, so we can talk about that. But I saw the strife in the communities which I worked in, and then I moved on to work in the supplement industry because there were no posts for me available in government, even though I was passionate about continuing to help there. Went into the supplement industry and eventually into the editorial industry, working for the top health magazine in South Africa at the time, called Health Intelligence Magazine, which is since closed down, but at the time it was very popular. And I worked my way up to the nutrition editor there. And so I was editing all the other writers' work and also ensuring that their work was strongly referenced and scientifically based, as well as catchy, because they were all journalists. I wanted to make sure that what they were saying was scientifically founded. And around 2012, Prof. Noakes started coming out of the woodwork again, this time saying, you should all be following a low carb. So now I've kind of wound back in time, Maritza. So I told you about my master's degree, which was 2016. I've rewound now to 2012, coming from a traditional perspective. And I met with Prof. Noakes, and I wanted to hear what he had to say because he had started making waves in South Africa at the time, and I'd been covering him for our magazine. And I realized that actually there was a lot more scientific literature supporting what he had to say than I had thought. And maybe this A1 rated scientist wasn't a quack. Maybe what he actually was saying, people should be taking notice of. And the literature that I had been going through seemed to support that. So I wanted to go see him talk at one of our local universities. And my employer said, well, you can, but you can only take time off work to do that if you ask him to be an expert witness in our case against the Sugar Association. Now, I worked for a supplement company who was selling stevia sweetener. And in this advert, they claimed that eating too much sugar, they said, eat stevia because eating too much sugar causes obesity, diabetes, promotes cancer, a whole lot of these kind of claims. And the Sugar Association, surprisingly, did not like it. And so they took the company I worked for to the Advertising Standards Authority, complained about the advert, and Prof. Noakes, against the Sugar Association, he said, yes, let me be an expert witness in this case against them because these claims are true. And he said he just doesn't have that much time. Can I co-author it with him? And so I said yes. And that's when I started diving more into that research and then writing with Prof. Noakes. I then went on to study my master's with him as well because I realized that my passion really was in this space of carbohydrate restriction. When you see the difference it can make in people's lives and you actually read the literature that supports it, you can't unsee that information. And so from there, I moved on to continuing to have a foot in the Noakes Foundation, which is the Questioning the Science, which is all about research, because I love research, but working most of my time in another associated company called Nutrition Network. And Nutrition Network does a really important job of training healthcare professionals in how to use lower carbohydrate diets for therapeutic purposes. And this is beyond now type 2 diabetes. I think type 2 diabetes is a moot point, Maritza. We know that a low-carb diet can put type 2 diabetes into remission. There's so much evidence out there since 2016. But it turns out that a ketogenic, which is a very low carbohydrate diet, can have benefits for neurological conditions, including Alzheimer's, which is now known as type 3 diabetes. Unsurprisingly, it helps with that. Even other degenerative neurological conditions, such as Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis, even neurodevelopmental disorders like autistic spectrum disorder. There's evidence mounting now in mental health, which is a very new field, but it's been successfully used to treat depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and anxiety in adults. And the evidence is starting to mount for it potentially being used in those areas in children, based on a lot of evidence in the epileptic population in children, because we know that a ketogenic diet can stop seizures in epileptic children. And in fact, it has been used for that purpose for over 100 years now. So there's those applications, but it also can help for other things. It can make infertile women fertile if they have polycystic ovarian syndrome. As soon as you start on a keto diet and you have polycystic ovarian syndrome, you better watch out, because you might just fall pregnant, and I've seen it happen countless times. Weight loss because you just stop being hungry. Ketogenic ketones, which are very short little fats. That's what they are. They're short fats. You get long fats, you get medium fats, and you get short fats. And ketones are short fats that can cross the blood-brain barrier and fuel the brain, which is other fats can't do that. And they also have other signaling effects in the body that make them really beneficial. So they can reduce inflammation. So unsurprisingly, a ketogenic diet has been used very successfully for inflammatory conditions, for autoimmune conditions, because of its effect on the immune system. Just so many things that can be used for. And we train doctors, dietitians, nurses, psychologists, and now coaches, and now even lay people. We're having our new training coming out in a few months, towards the end of the year or beginning of next year, that will be teaching lay people how to use this to improve their health. But thus far, we have been the gold standard education platform for doctors, dietitians, nurses, and other allied healthcare professionals, because we have to know how to implement this in our practice. It's such a powerful treatment modality, either on its own or as an adjunct treatment to other treatments.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Tamzyn. That is amazing. I mean, you guys are doing an amazing job. Very, very, very excited about the new training coming as well. So
yes,
for everybody's
exercise training.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And I also did want to mention Eat Better South Africa, but we'll get to that as well, because that's another organization that's very close to my heart and I'm involved in as well.
So just for everyone that's viewing and it's online, please say hi in the comments. Tell us where you're from. Drop your questions. We are ready for you to just throw us under the bus with all the questions that you want to know from Tamzyn. So Tamzyn, from our side so far, we've got Ian here from Canada. Johanna says
Ian.
hi. And then Johanna Sommer kicks off our questions. She goes, do you think the battle with a low carb, high fat keto diet has been won, or is there more work to be done?
There's always more work to be done. So even though, if you watch these kind of lives, you would think, oh, well, this is accepted everywhere, but it isn't accepted everywhere. I still, when I try to treat cancer patients with a ketogenic diet, I have been unable to find an oncologist who can work with me. Because we know there's this all sorts of books on treating cancer using a ketogenic diet and using fasting to reduce chemotherapy side effects, and that, which we know works. But you go to your oncologist, are you going to hear that? No, you're going to hear it from platforms like the Noakes Foundation, or trainings through Nutrition Network, or reading Dr. Seafried or Miriam Kalamian's work. But you're not going to find it at your local oncologist. Oncologists need to be trained on cancer and keto. And we need to develop networks of practitioners that are willing and knowledgeable about the space, because it can make such a difference in people's lives. And the lay people, Maritza, the millions of South Africans who are struggling with obesity and all the related conditions, and watching their parents die with cardiovascular disease and gangrene and things from their legs from diabetes, that is all avoidable. They don't know that it's avoidable. Even hypertension, high blood pressure. I see it again and again and again. And the people in the community, and people, even no matter what your socioeconomic status is, they don't know that within a week of reducing your carbohydrate intake dramatically, you can normalize your blood pressure in many cases, and that diet and exercise is accepted in generally all the guidelines as being the first treatment approach. But yes. What do clinicians recommend, and what do people think they need to do? They think they need to eat less and exercise more. But the truth is, Maritza, that relies on willpower. And humans are terrible at willpower. We don't have willpower. We have it for a short period of time, but evidence indicates that willpower is never enough to allow for sustained benefits, because you'll fall off the bus eventually. What you need is to change your body to not want that stuff, to naturally reduce your appetite to lose weight. And that is all happening inside your body based on signaling and stuff that's happening. It's a physiological, biological thing. So you have to change your physiology so that your body wants to eat less. And then you will succeed. You can't succeed for that long just relying on your mind power. And so, Jana, the answer is we have so much work to do, because we still have rising rates of the obesity and related diseases, pandemics. And until that stops, we need to keep doing our important work.
That's very, very true. Very, very true. I mean, I'm talking about out of personal experience. I mean, my mom is in a wheelchair today due to diabetes. And I mean, that's not, she's never going to walk again. That is done. The decisions that they made, or that has never, information they never received, has now led to her being wheelchair bound, So it's very important to educate. So, Tamzyn, from my side, I am now very new in this field. My body, it's time. I need to make a change. How do we start? Where do we start? Going on to what mentality, what do we need to do to start getting us ready to go on a low fat diet?
Oh, look, a high fat diet. So I think you have to educate yourself. And the thing is, what you need at this, so I must say, if you can wait till the beginning of next year, you can join Nutrition Network's upcoming basically course for the average person. So it's a program that we take you through. We teach you week by week in very bite-sized chunks what to do. You're monitored by you're overseen by a coach. You're monitored by your doctors. It's a responsible step-by-step way of doing it. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to go find a practitioner online. Again, you can go to the Nutrition Network, to the Find a Practitioner page, and you'll find whoever is practicing in this area who can start guiding you through it now already. If you have got an underlying health condition, it is best that you are monitored by a knowledgeable healthcare practitioner, a dietitian or doctor. And a doctor would need to be involved if you have to adjust your medications. But if you go to a dietitian, they will be able to guide you or team up with a doctor who can do that for you. But you also have to start educating yourself, I think. And that entails watching lives like this, going onto the Nutrition Network page, onto the Noakes Foundation page, going onto YouTube, and going to basically looking in the area of low carb nutrition. And there are plenty of people out there, plenty of practitioners who talk about it, whether that's Eric Westman, whether it's Paul Mason, whether it's Ken Berry, Anthony Chaffee. There's all sorts of people who are talking about this. And you start getting your head around the fact that fat isn't the problem, but that carbs are the problem. And once you understand that, then, and understand why you get fat, then you'll be able to understand what you're doing. You need to understand what you're doing. So I can, in a nutshell, Maritza, if we have time, can I just, in 2 minutes, explain why we get fat?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Yes.
So when you eat carbs, it gets broken down into sugar. This sugar is called glucose. So when people say you have high blood glucose or high blood sugar, okay, so carbs, people don't think it's sugar. When you eat a slice of bread or eat pasta or eat rice, they think, oh no, just sugar, sugar. Sugar is sugar, but so are the starches. And when you eat them, they get broken down into glucose, and your blood glucose, or your blood sugar, goes up. When your blood sugar goes up, you produce a hormone, which is like a key, called insulin. And insulin does many things, but two of the big things that you need to remember it does is, one, insulin is the primary fat storage regulating hormone. If you have high insulin levels, you are in fat storage mode. It's sending a signal to your fat stores to open the floodgates and let lots of fat in, and close the exit gates and don't let any fat out. So when you're eating carbs, you have high insulin and you are in fat storage mode. You cannot burn that fat. So that also means that when you are between meals, you get hungry because you can't access the fat because your insulin levels are high. So you have no fuel. So you just end up eating more to get fuel to satiate your hunger. Okay. So you have to drop the insulin level so you can access your fat and break it down and use it for energy and start losing it. Okay. So when you eat carbs, insulin's high, and that's what it's doing. It's making you fat. It's partitioning your fuel into storage and not allowing you to burn it. Okay. So that's the one thing that insulin does. And the other thing, the main thing that it does, is that its job, the reason why it's there is to actually put that sugar that's now in your blood into the cells so that you don't get high blood sugar, so that you don't get diabetes. So that's its job. That's why it's there, to regulate your blood sugar levels. But the cells get hurtful, as we would say in South Africa. They're like, why do you keep unlocking me? I'm full of sugar. I don't want any more sugar inside me. It's becoming toxic. I'm full. I'm saturated. Stop. I don't want any more sugar. It's like, leave it in the blood. I'm sick of being a martyr. That's what the cells say, And then what do? They're like, well, I'm going to start changing the locks on my doors. I don't want any more sugar coming in from the bloodstream when I'm so full, no matter what insulin says. So insulin, the key, keeps trying to unlock the locks, but the locks on the doors of the cells start changing because the cells are hurtful. And so suddenly they're like, well, no more sugar this far and no further. And then what happens? That is when you start becoming pre-diabetic or moving towards diabetes, because then the sugar can't get into the cells anymore and your blood sugar starts going up and up and up and up. But during all of this time, this insulin, which is floating around, you're making more of it and more of it to try and bombard these doors to open, because the insulin's job is to stop you from getting diabetes. And the cells are like, no, I'm sick. I'm so full of the sugar. And then the insulin's going higher and higher and higher. And what is it doing in the background? Pushing more and more fat into storage, turning extra sugar into storage, because it's like, well, I need to do something with all this extra sugar that's floating around in the blood. And when you're in that metabolic situation, you can't lose weight. So what do? You teach your body to burn fat. That's what you do. And when you teach your body to burn fat, you have to put those keys back where they came from. And in order to do that, you've got to stop pushing sugar into your bloodstream. And remember, starches get broken down into sugar. So drop the anything that gets broken down into sugar, drop that in your diet, cut the sugars, cut the starches, cut the processed food out, and then your insulin will go down. And that might be a bit unpleasant at first. You need to make sure you're having enough salt and doing it responsibly, because you're going to start weeing out a lot of salt, which will make your blood pressure drop very quickly, which is why this diet works really well for blood pressure. Is insulin's third thing that I didn't mention it does. Remember, it puts sugar into the cells and the cells get full. It makes you store fat, puts you into fat storage mode, but insulin also raises blood pressure. And it does that by telling the kidneys to hold on to fluid and salt. So while insulin's there doing all its stuff, it's telling the kidneys to hold on to fluid and salt. Where does that extra fluid and salt go? It goes into the blood, and the blood becomes more. And when you have more blood circulating, you get higher pressure on these blood vessels, which are basically like hose pipes, right? If you switch the tap on higher and make more water flow through the hose pipe, the water pressure is going to go up. Similarly, if you are not weeing out the salt and water because insulin's telling you not to, you're going to get more circulating blood volume and higher blood pressure. You stop eating the carbs, you're going to start being able to break down your fat stores, and this change starts happening within 3 days. So give yourself 3 days for your cells machinery to change, to start being able to process not all this carbs, but start processing the fat that you're going to give it instead. So you're telling your body I'm not giving you carbs anymore like a modern processed food human. I'm going to be more like a hunter-gatherer, more like the Eskimos, more like the Hadza from Tanzania, more like the Maasai warriors from Kenya. And I'm going to rather optimize my fat burning factory cells and upregulate the machinery required to burn fat. So don't eat the carbs, rather eat the fat, and then your cells change their machinery really quickly to be able to burn fat. Your insulin goes down, you start weeing out water and salt. Your blood pressure will go down too, which means you might have to start eating a bit more salt. And you will know that. You will know if you need more salt by your symptoms. So if you find when you go onto a low carbohydrate, higher fat diet that you start feeling lightheaded when you stand up, especially. So you stand up and you get that lightheadedness. It's called orthostatic hypotension. That's one thing showing you that your blood pressure's dropped so much you're starting to become dehydrated. So you get that, you start getting chills, you start getting low energy because your blood pressure is so low, it's not providing all your cells with enough energy. So you start getting low energy. You can start feeling a little bit nauseous or queasy. So you basically just feel unwell. You feel almost fluish. And indeed, this is called keto flu. And if you get signs and symptoms, Google it, of keto flu when you start eating this way, you need to up your salt and fluid intake, but mainly salt. So on this diet, on this way of eating, you can't be scared of salt and you can't be scared of fat. And by fat, I don't mean processed fats. I mean real fats. And the question to ask yourself when you eat this way is, what did my ancestors eat? Did my ancestors run around hunting woolly mammoths and pulling up tubers and picking berries? Yes. Did my ancestors eat Kellogg's cornflakes and drink Coke and eat bread and pasta? The answer is no. So don't eat the stuff your ancestors didn't eat. Eat the stuff your ancestors did eat, because your genes have had so many years to get used to those foods. And they've only had a very small proportion of time to get used to the processed foods that we eat today. Your body is rubbish at it. And then eventually you get fat and you get sick. And if you have underlying medical health conditions, please go onto the Nutrition Network, find a practitioner website, and find a practitioner to support you through this so that you do it in a healthy, responsible, safe way.
Yes. Fantastic. Thank you, Tamzyn. That was very much fun. I love the fact that you say the key is broken. I love it. Love it. So I'm just quickly going back to the board here. Just to say hi, we've got William. He is an American living in Thailand. He has been keto for about 10 years. Then we have Christy here. Christy here from Port Elizabeth. And then we've got Domenico. He's from Italy.
Wow, from everywhere. Hey, hi, Domenico.
Anna, she says, hello, girls. And there's a lot of work to be done.
Hi, Anna.
We also have a question from Henry. He says, if someone gets diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, are there dietary interventions? Yes. Elevate or manage their symptoms?
Okay, that's a very good question, Henri. Very good question. Autoimmune conditions are rising as well. And we shouldn't be surprised because our food environment is toxic. So we are going to get sick. You know, if you feed a lion, I don't know, just chicken, it also starts to get sick. It's just not supposed to eat just chicken, you know, or worse, imagine feeding it cakes or our processed food. Is the lion going to be healthy? No, it's a toxic food environment. Similarly, we're not going to be healthy. And I could have chosen a panda for that example, by the way. I mean, is a panda bear supposed to be eating processed food either? It's supposed to be eating bamboo. Stop feeding it bamboo. It's also going to get sick. You got to eat what you're supposed to eat. What is your appropriate food? So yes, autoimmune conditions are rising. Now, a ketogenic diet could help with autoimmune conditions because it is anti-inflammatory. An autoimmune condition is when your body attacks its own self, its own cells. Generally, it'll be focused on one specific thing. So in the case of, for example, type 1 diabetes, the body attacks the pancreatic beta cells, destroys them, and your body can't make insulin anymore. In the case of inflammatory bowel diseases, your body's immune system attacks the gut. And there's a whole lot of other ones, lupus and Hashimoto's thyroiditis, where the body attacks your thyroid. And then you end up having to go onto thyroid hormone because you can't make it yourself. So it's autoimmune conditions can vary largely, but they're all about the thugs of your immune system, which is the inflammatory response. The thugs of your immune system, not the clever ones, not the strategists of your immune system, but the thugs of the immune system attacking parts of your own body because they're stupid frontline soldiers who get confused. And there was probably some kind of infective agent or something that they were attacking. And when they attacked, they probably got their eyes shut out and they weren't able to see the wood for the trees anymore. And they started just attacking your own body because, as stupid thugs do, and then you're stuck with an autoimmune condition. So what can you do? You need a diet that reduces inflammation reduces the overreaction of the thugs in your immune system. And there are some special anti-inflammatory molecules that when these thugs are exposed to them, they calm down. It's kind of like you can imagine the special spray that you sprinkle over the frontline soldiers and they get all chilled. So it's a bit like that. And these are called anti-inflammatory molecules. And so you're looking for an anti-inflammatory diet to help with that. There are all sorts of different anti-inflammatory diets. You can even look up the anti-inflammatory diet, the AID, which has been shown to help with certain autoimmune conditions. But the ketogenic diet is an anti-inflammatory diet because it activates these magical molecules, these magical anti-inflammatory molecules, which have got big scientific names, but it activates them and it reduces your inflammatory response, which can help control autoimmune conditions. But my very favorite of ketogenic diets, because there's a whole lot of different versions of a low carb diet, right? There's not just one thing. Paleo is a version of a low carb diet, Atkins, Banting, keto, and carnivore, or everything in between keto and carnivore. These are all versions of low carbohydrate diets. Now, interestingly, a carnivore diet is coming to the fore as being particularly good for fighting autoimmune and inflammatory conditions. This is because there are a whole lot of inflammatory components, also known as anti-nutrients, within plants, particularly some plants. Some plants have more of these inflammatory molecules than others, such as, for example, nightshades, crucifers, brassicas. So these are, you can Google those words, but basically nightshades are things like your peppers and tomatoes. A lot of people find that they react to those in an inflammatory way. Other things might even be things that are thought to be quite good, like broccoli and cauliflower. They can worsen inflammatory conditions too. And then the onion family can also worsen inflammation. So we know that grains are the worst. Grains and legumes are the worst for that because they are packed, filled with anti-nutrients like wheat germ, agglutinin, phytates, lectins, all sorts of things that have a very irritating effect on starting in the gut. But when the gut becomes leaky, then they can start leaking through into the bloodstream and cause all sorts of, basically cause the thugs of your immune system to go cray-cray. And then you end up with worse autoimmune conditions. So I have seen quite a lot of patients who have managed to reverse their autoimmune conditions or put them autoimmune conditions into remission, much like with the diabetes that we spoke about, by using a carnivore diet. And there's a recent study that has just come out, if you look it up, by Nick Norwitz and Adrian Sotomotor. And they published a case series of 10 inflammatory bowel disease patients. So remember, this inflammatory bowel disease is inflammation of the gut caused by your the immune system attacking the gut because they're blinded and they're confused. These people put onto a carnivore slanted keto diet. So some people would call it ketovore diet, an animal-based keto diet. The majority of, they all significantly improved. And some of them even went into remission. So we know that a carnivore diet, the evidence is limited, But in my practice, I've also seen amazing results with a carnivore diet. And in fact, I have been diagnosed with an inflammatory bowel disease, and I eat a carnivore-esque diet, not fully carnivore, but mostly carnivore. And I find that it controls my bowel symptoms very well. I'm not complete. I'd say sometimes I'm completely in remission, but sometimes my diet isn't enough to keep me in remission. And this is where I think things like stress and
Yeah.
getting enough sleep,
Mm.
and also finding your specific sensitivities when it comes to diet comes in. When I get highly stressed, my remission goes no matter how good I am with my eating. And I think the same thing goes for other people, because stress affects your immune system as well.
Yeah.
So there's other things that are involved, and you also need to find your specific triggers, your dietary triggers, and a dietitian can help you with that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Jana also asked us here, are autoimmune conditions more common in our modern world? If it seems to me, or it perhaps becomes our diet are so filled with nasties, our bodies cannot function how it is supposed to anymore. Jo, ek kan nie vandag nie
Yes.
sê. The day is almost
No worries. Yes, so absolutely. Yanni, you are right. The autoimmune conditions are rising along with all these other diseases. And, some people, I've had the accusation leveled at me from family and friend members that you think that keto is a magic bullet that addresses everything. How can we believe you? If you just said, okay, it's good for diabetes and weight loss, sure, we would believe you. But you're saying it's good for so many different things. Like, how can we believe you? Nothing's a magic bullet. When you put it that way, it sounds like I'm a quack, right? Like Prof. Noakes apparently was. But the truth is, if you are in a toxic environment, how can you expect it only to affect one thing? How can you expect it not to result in a whole lot of heterogeneous or varied things falling apart, right? If you soak someone in a toxic stew, they're not just going to end up with cancer. They're probably also going to end up with, I don't know, diabetes, autoimmune conditions, all sorts of things, right? Gastro.
Yeah.
My point is that sometimes a toxic environment causes very varied, apparently different conditions. And the fact that a ketogenic diet or variations of a ketogenic diet can help with things like as disparate as autoimmune diseases, to cancer, to neurological conditions, to mood disorders, to epilepsy, to polycystic ovarian syndrome and difficulties falling pregnant, to overweight. How? It's because it's correcting the toxic food environment. And so, yes, these things are all on the rise. They're all on the rise because they're all caused by a toxic food environment.
So true. That's absolutely so true. And there's like very little we can do about it, because if they see it on the TV, they want to eat it, mommy. We want that one, please.
Exactly.
So it's very hard. Kim asked here, when you have been very undernutritioned and show T1 symptoms, is there a possibility of the beta cells being reactivated by the carnivore lifestyle?
It is a possibility. It is a possibility. So she was saying, just so I can get it right, she's showing type 1 diabetes symptoms.
Yes.
Okay.
So yes, undernutrition.
Okay.
Yeah, so very undernutrition and shows T1 symptoms. Is there a possibility of the beta cells being reactivated by the carnivore lifestyle?
Okay. So I'm going to say there's always a possibility if you get it early enough. But once the beta cells have been destroyed, it doesn't, my understanding is that you can't get them back. However, I haven't looked deeply enough into the literature on that topic. I do think that you should look at For example, Beth McNally, if you look up the dietitian Beth McNally, she does a lot of work in type 1 diabetes. Other resources would be Dr. Ian Lake. He does a lot of research into type 1 diabetes. Richard Bernstein's book. And then Amy Rush is another dietitian who works in the space. So if you want to work with someone in the space for carnivore or keto diets and type 1 diabetes, I recommend working with them, even if you do it virtually. And if you catch it early enough, there is some evidence that we could potentially save some of those pancreatic beta cells. However, even if the pancreatic beta cells have been destroyed, there is very good evidence that you can avoid, as you get older with type 1 diabetes, you can avoid developing type 2 diabetes, which generally happens in type 1s, because they inject with so much insulin, it's impossible to create the level of balance between carbs that you eat and insulin that your body creates in response to the carbs that you eat. It is so tightly balanced by this very, very careful monitoring system within the body that your body knows exactly how much insulin to release in response to eating whatever you just ate. And we can never know, even with carb counting, exactly how much insulin to inject a type 1 diabetic to mimic the body's natural amount of insulin that it would have produced in response to that food you ate. And so keto has shown great promise in managing type 1 diabetes. In fact, there's been a long-term 10-year study by Andrew Kubrick, and I would suggest looking it up on himself. He did a study looking at, because he is a type 1 diabetic, looking at the effect of a ketogenic diet on managing type 1 diabetes, and there's real promise, and it's looking incredibly good, because by controlling the carbs that you take in, you don't need to inject as much insulin in response to eating anymore. You inject enough for your big long-lasting bolus one, basal one, and then you can inject far less to control the amount of protein that you eat, maybe during the day, or a little bit of carbs that you must eat. But so while later on you might not be able to stop being type 1 diabetic, you can certainly do far better at controlling your type 1 diabetes, reducing your hypo and hyperglycemic incidence, and also ensuring that you grow old and healthy, rather than end up with the chronic diseases associated by injecting too much insulin during your lifetime, by following a keto diet. And there definitely you will need help from a knowledgeable healthcare professional such as Beth McNally, Amy Rush, Ian Lake, even Dr. Neville Wellington in Cape Town. Yeah, so I think find someone who's very knowledgeable about diabetes and can help you with this.
Fantastic. So Dominico's asked, can you please talk about cholesterol in your keto diet?
Yes, Dominico, this is a really, really good question. So indeed, a low carb, high fat, often high saturated fat diet that we eat, which I eat definitely, can raise cholesterol levels in some people. And in fact, in some people, known as the lean mass hyperresponders, or the LMHR phenotype, which has become quite big in this space, they get very, very high cholesterol levels. And I would like to say, just full disclosure, I am an LMHR. I have an incredibly high cholesterol level, and I avoid showing it to the doctors myself. But there is evidence showing that cholesterol is not, wait, before I go there. So cholesterol doesn't go up in everybody. It seems to be there's some genetic control over who amongst us get high cholesterol in response to eating a high saturated fat diet. Okay. Eating more dietary cholesterol doesn't raise your cholesterol, by the way. So you're going to be scared of eggs. Don't be scared of eating dietary cholesterol raising your cholesterol. 80% of cholesterol in your blood is made by your own liver. So you got to look at what you are making your own cholesterol. And indeed, when you eat more saturated fat, in some people, they do end up with higher cholesterol levels, such as me. And some people end up with very high cholesterol levels, such as me. There's many more people than me who do. I've a huge number of people. My husband does as well. I know friends that do. I know patients that do. So people who end up with high cholesterol is very common. And the question is this dangerous? Now, if cholesterol causes heart disease, if cholesterol causes you basically to end up with clogged blood vessels or clogged arteries. If they clog up, they stick to your blood vessels. They then raise your blood pressure, and the sticky cholesterol can potentially dislodge and end up in all sorts of places it shouldn't, and result in heart attacks and strokes and things like that. That's called the diet heart hypothesis, or the lipid heart hypothesis, where fat causes high cholesterol. Cholesterol gets stuck in your blood vessels and causes heart disease. Now, that was that theory was developed by someone called Ancel Keys, who did the 7-country study, which was actually more like a 44-country study or 33-country study or something. But he excluded all those other countries because they didn't fit his narrative or his hypothesis. And he only kept 7 of the countries. When he added in, if you actually add in the data from the other countries, it turns out that this hypothesis isn't true. But he kept the studies that showed that if you eat more fat, you're going to end up with more heart disease. So it's an association study. In countries that ate more saturated fat, they had more heart disease. Now, this was only, remember, he didn't actually show this correlation when you add all of the countries in, but he kept the ones that did show it, which means it's not true. He also conducted another study called the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, where he apparently also showed this. But since then, if you look up Minnesota Coronary Experiment and you look up Ramsden, look for the surname Ramsden if you go onto Google Scholar, and you will find a study that shows the recent reanalysis of all the data, including data that was left out of Ancel Keys' study on that shows that actually his hypothesis was not proven, that high cholesterol didn't cause heart disease and high saturated fat didn't cause heart disease. Okay. So there were other studies also. The Women's Health Initiative showed that actually found, and they excluded this evidence, but it's also been republished and reanalyzed. It showed that women with high cholesterol actually had less chance of dying of heart disease, especially when they were over menopausal age. So there's a lot of studies that actually have recently been reanalyzed and found that actually there was some skullduggery at play to try and support Ancel Keys' fame with his theory that eating more fat causes high cholesterol, which causes heart disease. Now, the more recent evidence kind of indicates that cholesterol may be the firefighter and not the arsonist. So LDL cholesterol, the so-called what was thought as the bad cholesterol, it lodges in the sorry, I was distracted by the question that popped up. But I didn't get to read the question, but now I've lost my train of thought. Okay, so LDL cholesterol, which was thought to be the bad cholesterol, yes, it is there at the site of these plaques in the blood vessels or inside of these cholesterol buildup. But it turns out that it may actually be there because it is fighting the fire, because there's already blood vessel damage. So it's there to put a Band-Aid on a very damaged blood vessel. So it's kind of like saying, okay, there's a fire. There's always firefighters at the site of the fire. The firefighters caused the fire. Now, is that true? No, there are always firefighters at the site of the fire, but the firefighters didn't cause the fire. The firefighters happened to be there to fight the fire. And it turns out that LDL is more likely to be doing this, and that we need to find out what is causing the fire. Because having high cholesterol levels alone doesn't result in heart disease. And there's been a recent study that has just come out by Dave Feltman and his group that compared the blood vessel calcification and cholesterol buildup of, I think it was like 100 people who ate a normal diet and 100 people who ate a very high carb, very high fat diet and had very high cholesterol levels. And they compared them over a year with a very sensitive imaging tool that allowed them to see cholesterol buildup in the blood vessels. And they found no difference. In fact, the people with the high cholesterol levels seemed to do slightly better with regards to their blood vessel cholesterol buildup than did the people on the regular diet who were scanned. This is 100 people versus 100 people. And the study is going on. And this is showing that people with very high cholesterol, the lean mass hyperresponders who eat a ketogenic high fat diet, low carb diet, that their blood vessels aren't actually getting more cholesterol buildup than the people who don't have such high cholesterol levels, which is which is the first very real evidence to put the nail in the coffin of the diet heart or the lipid heart hypothesis. So cholesterol, in my opinion, based on the evidence, based on the reanalysis of old evidence, based on Feltman's study, shows that high cholesterol levels in itself does not cause heart disease. But if you have damage to your blood vessels and damage to your cholesterol, that cholesterol will end up on your blood vessels and start clogging your blood vessels. So stop damaging your cholesterol and stop damaging your blood vessels. And how do you do that? You do that by eating a diet that is as close to nature as what we should, as humans should be eating as possible. No sugars, no processed foods, and if you can, drop the starches too. And by doing that, because the evidence shows that sugar, within 30 minutes of eating or drinking it, damages the very small little, it's called the glycocalyx. It's this very protective, slithery, hairy layer, which they only discovered in 2016, actually, of little hairs that cover all your blood vessels and help the blood to pass smoothly through the blood vessels. They couldn't see it before, but now since imaging tools improved, in 2016, they found that there's this glycocalyx, which is this viliated, like hairy mucus kind of layer that helps the blood to flow through your blood vessels nice and easily. And when you eat sugar, this layer gets damaged, which allows damage to happen to the blood vessel layer, which then requires your firefighters to come in. And if those firefighters are damaged, they often can't get out again. So stop damaging your blood, your cholesterol with sugar, with processed foods, and with toxins as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I just want you to have a little conversation about Eat Better South Africa, because we only have got little time left. So you can please enlighten us about Eat Better South Africa, and how does the community process work, and how do we get involved, and what does it really do? How does Eat Better South Africa and help get the community to eat the right things?
This is a really important question. So I just want to say, within South Africa, guys, South Africa is, okay, the whole world is plagued by obesity and chronic diseases, but 50%, the latest Human Science Research Council study, which was released in March this year, 2024, showed that half of adult South Africans are overweight or obese. It showed that. It also showed that, what was the percentage of stunting? I think it was 1 in 4 children are stunted. In other words, they are so malnourished, they're not getting enough of the good nutrients that they need to grow, namely protein and certain vitamins and minerals, that 1 in 4 of them aren't growing properly. So they're too short, which also goes hand in hand with their brains not growing properly. Do you know that 2/3 of women in South Africa, so 50% of people in South Africa are overweight or obese, which is associated with chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes. But 2/3 of women in South Africa are overweight or obese. So it's huge. And with this comes the diseases that we know that you're seeing in your mother, Maritza. You know, the diabetes, which ruins families. It steals your loved ones from you prematurely, and it's totally reversible. So what we are wanting to do, and avoidable, what we are wanting to do is we are wanting to go into South African communities, because this is not just for the affluent. It's not fair to deny such a powerful intervention to the people who need it most, the people of South Africa who are suffering. And so that's what Eat Better South Africa is about. Eat Better South Africa is about teaching people in the communities to eat better, to be able to avoid and hopefully put into remission these conditions that are going to reduce their quality of life, reduce their ability, their earning ability to support their family, put a weight on their family, a financial weight on their family, put trauma on their family and on themselves. And instead, if we can help them to eat better, then they can avoid all of this and be healthy and live their best lives, which, no matter what your income is, every human's birthright is the natural health that we are born with. And so at Eat Better South Africa, we do a 6-week program. Our kind of gold standard program is a 6-week program. We go into the communities. We do 6 weeks of teaching them how to eat and set up basically this place a community coach in the communities affected or where we're doing the intervention, teach people how to eat, how to move, how to recognize which foods are good and bad, and set up a WhatsApp group amongst them so that they can find local cheap foods that, might say, oh, on the corner of this road, you can find, really cheap, I don't know, chicken feet or smileys, which are the brains of sheep, or whatever it is that's locally available, cheap, or this butcher's giving offcuts of meat that we can use to cook in, or, share information to find affordable food options within the poor communities. And that includes things like, can they grow their own vegetables as well, to supplement their meals? What can they do instead of just eating maize, which has become a staple in South Africa, which isn't the traditional food of our people? It was brought in by the settlers, and reminding people that that isn't what their healthy ancestors were eating, And so by doing this, we are bringing health back to South Africa, stopping children from being 1 in 4 children, a quarter of all children, from being stunted and not being able to think properly and grow a proper brain and a proper body, stopping the 70% of women from struggling under a heavy burden of overweight and obesity in South Africa, that they have to slog to work under that level of weight, and then increasing their risk of all sorts of conditions which they have to struggle with afterwards, high blood pressure, all that kind of thing. We want to combat that, and we are combating that. And the problem is only financial. So if anyone out there knows of anyone who has money, who's looking to donate to a worthy cause that can help the South African people, please go to the Eat Better South Africa website. That's Eat Better South Africa. Look us up, go to our website, and you'll see the donations tab, or drop us an email, which you can also find at that website. Get involved. We don't just do that intervention. We work with feeding schemes to improve the food given to children. We work with all sorts of different things to create sustainable food systems within rural communities or other communities. It's all about fighting the scourge of ill health within the South African community. And so I'm very passionate about that work. And if you would like to get involved in any way, please drop me an email. Please go to the Eat Better South Africa website, look us up, drop us an email, or donate if you can. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, Tamzyn, what is up in the future for you currently? Where can we get a hold of you? Where's your handles? Tell us a little bit of what's happening with you now for the next few months coming for the rest of the year.
Well, my focus is mainly on Nutrition Network. We are busy launching a brilliant exercise module for practitioners so that they can get their patients moving, because movement, physical activity, is also something that humans naturally do and need to do to be healthy. But it's difficult. We can't expect everyone to just dive in and become an athlete. And so this module this training is about getting your patients to be able to move in a way that is appropriate for them and their level of fitness and health. And it teaches practitioners to do that. It's a very, very exciting module. We will also be launching towards the end of the year, beginning of next year, a patient program for people, not necessarily patients, really, just anyone who wants to learn how to follow this way and be guided about following this way of eating. So find us at nutrition-network.org. You can contact me directly at Nutrition Network, at Tamzyn, TAMZYN, at nutrition-network.org. You can also contact us at Nutrition Network on Twitter, which is now X, on Instagram. You can find us also on Facebook, and you can find me on all 3 of those platforms as well, either as Tamzyn Murphy or Tamzyn Murphy RD, but you will find me there as well. And I am slowly but surely getting a little bit more active on social media. And my special interest at the moment is in mental health. So I recently spoke at the Low Carb San Diego conference last month on the topic of anxiety in children and how a ketogenic diet is showing great promise in that area, because we're seeing a huge amount of tormented people struggling with mental illness that is not their fault and that can be helped. And so my area of great interest at the moment is in that. So if you have anything, if you want to connect with me regarding that or anything else we've spoken about today, please contact me at Nutrition Network or privately at Tamzyn Murphy or Tamzyn Murphy RD.
Fantastic. I just want to thank our viewers. Thank you for putting up with me today. I don't know what happened. It was just one of the days. Tamzyn, again, thank you very much for joining us. We are very excited. Guys, don't forget, we have Dr. Anthony Shafee coming up on Monday. Dun, dun, dun. Me and Yana will be up at 2 a.m. So if you're up at 2 a.m. in South Africa time, please come and join us on our live. It's going to be fantastic. Us in the dark and having a great chat with Dr. Anthony Shafee. And Tamzyn, again, thank you for your time. I think we should have another live about mental health. I think that's one of the biggest topics all of us can listen to and learn from as well. But thank you so much.
And another one we can talk about is gut health, Marit. So we can add that to the lineup too.
Yes, I love it. Let's do it. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Lovely to have you.
Bye.
Bye.